first question for tonight goes, a question on karma. It is sometimes said that in the long journey of samsara, all beings have a collection of both good karma, merit, and bad karma. It's sometimes said that sins from the past can manifest as job loss, relationship breakdown, ill health, etc., while merit can manifest itself as property, wealth, promotions, influence, status, etc. If a person can calmly respond to hardships in life and find happiness and contentment despite their limitations, is this also fruition of merit? Can merit manifest as not having resentment or bitterness to things a person has lost or was never able to possess? Or is this sort of contentment not linked to karma?
Most of these things are linked to karma, but I'd say a lot of the karma is in this life. You don't have to think so much about past lives because that tends to become speculation and you can't prove it or know it for sure unless you have the ability to recollect past lives. But with wisdom, wise reflection, you can get to know your own character, the way you respond to things, the way you think, the way you do things. So if something goes wrong, like you lose your job, you can ask yourself questions, can't you? You can say, did I do something to lead up to this? It may be nothing to do with you. It may be just a kind of a very cold economic decision made by some group of bosses, supervisors, managers somewhere. And you're being, treated like a number on a page. It may not really be anything to do with how you've behaved or done anything. It's just that company is making a loss, so they're cutting back. But then it may be because of your behavior. If you lose your job, there may be certain things you've said and done that have led up to that, and it's quite obvious that you've fallen out with the other staff, or you didn't do the job properly, or you made lots of mistakes or something. There may be obvious reasons. So that's something you can investigate, isn't it? And in the worst scenario, if you have made mistakes or done things wrong, well, you can learn from that. Don't dwell on it too much, but just try and learn some lessons. But merit, we make merit on many different levels, don't we? So, there's the external things that happen to us. A lot of that is past karma coming back to us, particularly things like accidents, injury, illness, how other people treat us. Quite often that's to do with past karma. But it's also the internal merit, how do you deal with things? Like you say, if you can maintain a wholesome, skillful state of mind when you face difficulty, that's meritorious. That's for your benefit, isn't it? Because when you keep your mind in a wholesome state, even when you're facing pain or problems or things going wrong, then you'll be able to get through those problems better because you keep your mind in a wholesome state. If you are not giving in to anger, you're not impatient, you're not going to hatred and trying to seek revenge on other people, but you keep your mind calm, thinking clearly, then you can maybe find a way out of your problems quicker and better and more effectively. So merit works on many levels. It's the merit of, like you say, just having wealth, having good health, having wealth, people treating us well, and so on. But there's also the merit of your state of mind. So we make merit through our actions, our speech, and our mental development, in bhavana or meditation. And so there's many areas we can make merit, and if you keep making merit through your life, well, one of the qualities or the effects of making merit is that it cleanses the mind. It's reducing the effect of more negative states of mind. They won't come up so often, they won't be so powerful, they won't obstruct you or interrupt what you're doing so much if you're making merit in different ways. It brings you happiness. Probably that's the simplest equation. Merit equates with happiness. So if you're making merit, and particularly in the religion, through supporting Sangha, meditating, listening to Dhamma, coming to understand the Dhamma more and more, if you make this kind of merit, you're going to become happier and happier from that. And this kind of happiness will keep your mind afloat, bring it up, even if you're in situations where external events are dragging you down, or potentially you could be dragged down. You lose your job, say. If someone's got merit, they say, while I'm waiting for my next job, I've got time to do more dana, help more people, do more meditation, listen to the Dhamma. They'll use their time wisely until they get a new job. But if someone who's not making merit and doesn't understand this, maybe they lose their job and they become very depressed and get drunk and they can't find another job because they just go downhill very quickly. So it's like that. Merit helps you to deal with the ups and downs of life, but you have to keep making it, keep practicing. Or maybe you meet people who are going to scam you or lead you in ways that are only going to cause you harm. Someone with merit may quickly work that out and understand that and stay away from those people or not follow their advice. Someone without merit maybe just believes the first thing that anyone tells them and just get deluded and hoodwinked and conned by all the wrong people, and their life just ends up in a mess. So merit manifests in different ways as intelligence, wisdom, as strength of mind, having faith in the Buddha and his teachings, having patience, having energy for your practice. There's so many ways that merit helps us, but we have to keep developing it. It's not a limitless or an endless store of good qualities. You can run out of merit. Just like money in the bank, you can run out of money in the bank, you can run out of merit. If you stop making it, it will fade and disappear from your life, and things tend to go downhill. So keep making merit.
Sadhu. Next question. What is the gotrabhu citta?
Google it. You can Google it. It's they call it, I don't know if there's a modern translation yet, but they tend to call it the change of lineage citta from Patujana, unenlightened person, to Arya, noble one, or enlightened person. So particularly from unenlightened Patujana to Sotapanna. There's a link. It's because it's one moment of consciousness from one moment you're unenlightened, next moment you're a Sotapanna. It's the link between the two. The Buddha was very good and clear in talking about cause and effect, how there's all these chains and links of different causes and conditions leading up to different results, different effects. So that's one of the ways he talked about how there's that moment where the mind is neither unenlightened nor enlightened yet. It's just halfway. So Ajahn Chah used to talk about this. He says, like crossing a stream. We say a Sotapanna, one who's entered the stream, but gotrabhu citta is like one who's crossing the stream. They got one foot on the far side, the noble side, one foot on the unenlightened side. There, we say their causes and conditions are strong enough that they're destined to become a noble one. But the mind at that moment is not quite the mind of a noble one. It's sort of half-half. So one foot that side, one foot this. And I think Ajahn Chah, when he's talking about that, he's talking about experience that may be not exactly as it is in the books, because in the books it tends to be very dry, black and white. So we say unenlightened citta, gotrabhu citta, Arya citta, moment by moment. And these cittas are just one moment of consciousness. It's a very short, brief period of time. But Ajahn Chah would say, well, gotrabhu citta is more like gotrabhu pugala. The gotrabhu person is like they got one foot on this side of the stream, one foot on that, and it's like maybe for quite a while there's this back and forth. So like someone who's practicing a lot, and the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path come up really strong for a while, and they're almost enlightened, but not quite, and they kind of maybe slip back for a while. They get lazy, or something falls back. Their insight isn't quite so sharp for a while, or their samadhi fades, and the hindrances come back, and the negative mind states are still bothering them. And then they build up their energy, and it's like they get the foot is on the other side of the stream, and they're almost across, but they're not quite. You know, if you've ever actually jumped across a stream, sometimes it's like that. You know, you put one foot on the other side, but you don't have enough weight to go all the way over. So your body weight pulls you back to the first side you were on, and then you go back and forth for a while before you get over. Hopefully you don't fall in the water. But it's a bit like that, back and forth until you jump over and you're across, and then you never fall back, you never come back. And that's an Arya. An Arya Pugala, a noble one, never falls back, never loses faith in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, never goes back to the unwholesome states of the unenlightened mind. There's all kinds of things they've abandoned, let go of, the first three fetters. And they never have those first three fetters bothering them again. Never reborn in the lower realms, the hell realm, ghost realm, animal realm. But until they reach that point, there's a bit of back and forth in the mind. You know, this is just a practical description of how it is for a meditator, a practitioner. It isn't just a smooth meditate and then suddenly Arya, just like that. You know, there may be many days, years, or even lifetimes of practice until the final moment of what we call Sodapati Maggapala, the mindset of a Sotapanna arises. There may be many, many times preceding that where you're almost there but not quite. That's the gotrabhu citta.
Sadhu Luang Por. Next question. Luang Por, do you think our heart is as important as our breath? When we contemplate our breathing, should we be mindful of the beating of our heart as well? Sadhu.
It sounds like you're referring to the physical heart as opposed to the mental heart, which we call the citta. The physical heart, the hataya watu in Pali, the physical heart is obviously a vital organ for our existence, and the citta tends to be rooted or seated there with the physical heart. So it is very important, but it sounds like you're talking about the physical heart that beats and pumps blood around the body. And so some people practice mindfulness of breathing. Obviously they're bringing their attention back to their body with the breath, and they become much more aware of different things going on in the body. So some people are aware of different sensations. Sometimes aches and pains become prominent. Sometimes the sound or the vibration of the heart beating becomes very prominent because you're now mindful of your body, and your mindfulness is perhaps a little more subtle. You're not distracted, your mind is not going out to seeing things, hearing things, tasting things. Now you're just with the body, with the breath. So some people do find they become very aware of the heart beating. But the aim is to maintain mindfulness, equanimity with the breath. So if the heart is beating and you notice it, you can hear it, you can feel it, sense it. That's all you need to do. Just know, oh, that's the heart beating. You don't need to think about it or form an opinion about it or worry about it. You just notice it and let go and keep your mind with equanimity. That's your aim. But some people have this problem, you know, they become aware of their body and then they get reactions. So they're uncomfortable feeling their heart beating, or they sense the air going in and out of their ears, you know, that puts them off, or they sort of feel some kind of sensation at some part of their body and that becomes distracting. So often it's a hurdle you have to go through in the early parts of meditation, that you have various sensations in the body become prominent and they are annoying or distracting, but you just keep developing mindfulness and equanimity. After a while they'll fade and you won't notice them. And of course, if you get deeply into samadhi and you're with the mind and the breath are just merging into one, you won't notice the heart beating at all. You won't notice the sensations in the body, you won't be noticing sounds, you won't be feeling pain. So eventually it won't be a problem. So keep practicing and you should reach that point.
Sadhu Luang Por. Next question. Dear Luang Por, what do most monks do after their dependence period? Do they just travel wherever they want to, or are they usually tied to one monastery in a sort of contractual agreement? Which do you think is better? Thank you.
Depends how smart they are. If they're smart and they've got a good teacher, they won't do much without consulting their teacher. And if the teacher says go, they go. If the teacher says stay, they stay. That's how I trained, and I found that quite helpful, because most of us have big egos, and that's our biggest danger and enemy in our practice, is believing our own thoughts and opinions, views and opinions, because that's what we were doing as lay people, and many monks and nuns just want to carry on being lay people in robes. So don't do that. Follow your teacher. Assuming you have a good teacher, take their advice. And you may say, oh, it might be good for me to go off on my own somewhere, and they may agree, so then you go. And then you come back and say, oh, it was better living with the teacher, and your teacher will laugh at you and say, yeah, well, I just let you go so you could find that out. But if you've got a good teacher, I wouldn't go too far from them. Keep consulting them, check what they recommend, and they may say go off, they may say stay close. Depends on the person, depends on your level of practice as well. So there's no one fixed answer here, it depends from person to person. But often the monk who just wants his independence as quick as possible, wants to go off, they often don't get very good results in their meditation. They may think they do, but often they don't. Often it's coming from an urge. They can't learn to live with other people, they can't learn to live with themselves, so they just want to go off, have their freedom to follow their own desires, but they often don't get beyond desire because they're always following desire. So I would certainly investigate whatever motivation you have that makes you want to leave your monastery, leave your teacher and go off, because often it's coming from delusion, to be honest. Looking around in the Buddhist world, that's often the case. And it's a great blessing to have a good teacher. A good teacher is a shortcut to Nibbana, and if you value your teacher, appreciate them, they can help you through so many problems quickly that I would encourage you to really value your teacher.
Sadhu Luang Por. Another question. Dear Ajahn, during my practice of metta meditation, I suddenly recalled a person who did something terrible to me, and I felt a surge of anger. I attempted to send metta to this person, but whenever I recalled the action the person had done, the anger would resurface. May I seek your advice on how to overcome this anger? Thank you, Ajahn.
Well, if you can remember that somebody did something really terrible to you, it's really not surprising that anger comes up when you remember that, because they did something terrible to you. It's something that will take time to get over and to get a skillful attitude towards. So I'd actually set aside thoughts of that person, because you know what they did and you know how bad they were. I would start with yourself. If you're getting angry or upset remembering somebody who had done something terrible to you, just calm yourself down first, and you may have to just completely change the subject. Think of something that brings happiness, calm, peace, faith. Think of the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, teachers or practitioners that you respect, teachings that you find inspiring. Go to the breath is another one. Just go to the breath, calm yourself down. Chant, walk meditation, do wholesome things. Go and help somebody who needs help. Do all kinds of wholesome things, And when you're feeling more calm, you have a sense of well-being, then maybe go back to thinking of that person who did a terrible thing. And your goal or your aim is to get to the point where you can mindfully, with equanimity and detachment, think of that event, recall it, bring it up, think of it, but without falling into anger. So that doesn't mean to say you're trying to deny it, brush it under the carpet, say it didn't happen. If somebody did a terrible thing, it will always be a terrible thing. But what you're trying to separate out is your emotional reaction, which tends to come from craving and attachment, not wisdom. And your aim is to bring up mindfulness and wisdom towards this particular issue, that person, that event. And that may take time, but it's definitely worth doing, because otherwise it's just going to keep bugging you and keep causing you suffering over and over again. So you do have to learn to do this. But it's a step-by-step process, isn't it? First you have to calm down, get your mind back to a wholesome state. Then you have to start finding skillful ways to reflect back on what happened. And whatever works to help you see the bigger picture. So yeah, of course they've done something bad, terrible. But if they've done something terrible, then they've made a lot of bad karma for themselves. They're going to suffer for that. They're probably already suffering. Without you having to do anything, they're already suffering, and they will suffer for that. So if you can get to the point where you can look at this whole situation and this event skillfully, may actually bring you to a point of compassion. Not meaning you're denying or hiding what they've done, but you're saying what they've done was so bad, they're going to suffer for this for a long time. They're going to have their own pain. It came from pain, it's going to bring them more pain. Not a good thing. So you may get to the point where you're going to have some compassion for them, meaning you recognize, oh, they're going to suffer for this, and you wish them to be free from suffering, not so they can go and do more terrible things, quite the opposite. If being free from suffering means you hope that their state of mind improves to the point where they stop doing those terrible things. So the first thing is help yourself, stop dwelling on the event, stop going over it, feeling guilty, feeling bad, feeling angry. That's your first task maybe. The second task is to get to the point where you can see it as Dhamma, with wisdom, with mindfulness, and you're not reacting with anger, but you're seeing they've done a terrible thing. This is bad karma, this will cause them suffering, and you wish them to be free from suffering.
Sadhu Nunggu. Next question. Dear Ajahn, I have been using meditation to address my persistent fear, but it still arises from time to time. How can I overcome it? Thank you, Ajahn.
Like the Buddha, patience. Don't give up. Don't quit. Keep practicing. What did the Buddha say? He said, if fear arose when I was walking, I'd keep walking until that fear had subsided and passed away. Because fear is an impermanent mental state, an impermanent feeling. It will pass. You have to be patient enough and willing to practice with it till you see it pass. It may take time, but you can do it. It can be done. If he was sitting, he said he'd sit until the fear had passed. Whatever posture he was in, he would continue in that posture until the fear had passed. So he's setting the sort of standard there. I know it's not easy. I'm not saying this is an easy practice, but that's your aim, is to see fear as an impermanent mental state or emotion, an impermanent feeling that arises, passes away. What's impermanent is not self. It arises due to causes and conditions. When those causes and conditions change or pass, that emotion will pass. It's not a self, it's not really you. When you take it to be yourself, you identify with it as self, as me, myself. That's a delusion. So you have to investigate that delusion. It's a challenge. You have to rise to the challenge and bring up enough mindfulness, enough patience, enough effort enough wisdom to see that it's not self, and then it will bother you less and less and less. Sure, it may return, but each time it returns, if you establish mindfulness and reflect, it's impermanent, suffering, it's not self, you'll gradually lose power over you. And they say when you abandon fear, or each time you abandon fear, your mind becomes bolder, more courageous, stronger, brighter, happier. So it's worthwhile, even though it's difficult, it's worthwhile doing this.
Sadhu Luang Por. Next question. Hi Ajahn. How can I cultivate and practice death meditation?
Most simply, just keep reciting the word death. Death, 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 death. Or in Pali, maranang, 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 or whatever language you're most familiar with or comfortable with. Or it can be something a bit longer, maranang me niyatang. Death is certain, my death is certain. We have a few chants which help in the chanting book. So one is the reflection on impermanence. You can reflect, my death is certain, life is uncertain, death is certain. That's a really good reflection. Just bring that up every day. Oh, life is uncertain, death is certain. Or just death, or maranang. That's a good starting point. Then you can also develop it as a discursive meditation, meaning thinking around a theme. So you bring up the theme of death and think about it. What does death mean to you? How can I die? What will happen when I die? How will death affect my life? How will death affect all the things that I'm attached to and get worried about or angry about or desire? Think it through, the meaning of death. Think about how easy it is to die. This body is very fragile. Life is very uncertain. There's many aspects you can bring up, but you're just thinking about death as a theme and staying within that one theme. You don't let your mind stray out to think about what you're going to eat later or what movie you're going to watch later. You're just thinking about death, and you keep your mind within that one field of thought. And that's a kind of meditation. Maybe afterwards, then you bring up the one word, death, to remind you, or one reflection that reminds you of death. Death is synonymous with impermanence, so impermanence can do it as well. You just reflect impermanent, impermanent. Nothing lasts. Everything that is born will die. Whatever works to bring that perception up, make the perception to remember it very clearly, very strongly in your mind. It'll cut through a lot of the rubbish of the mind. Oh, I'm going to die, this doesn't matter. Oh, I'm going to die, it really doesn't matter, I can let this go. So death meditation can lead on to the practice of vipassana, contemplating anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanence, suffering, not self. It can also bring the mind to a state of one-pointedness, upajjhara samadhi, where the hindrances drop and your mind is just very peaceful in the present moment.
Sadhu Luang Por. Next question. Dear Ajahn Kalyano, thank you very much for the Dhamma talk. Can you please talk more about how to bring more wisdom to our compassion and kindness when helping others? When do we know if it is right to help people and when it is not the right action to do? When do we need to set boundaries? And when do we need to help both in a kind and wise way? Thank you.
Well, they're all very good questions and observations, so you've obviously thought about it. I think mainly we have to learn through experience, don't we? We do things, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. And that varies depending on the situation, the people, the context. And you have to keep learning and be adaptable, because sometimes something that worked before doesn't work this time. Sometimes we have to experiment, helping other people. also we change, don't we? You know, when you're young, you have a lot of strength. You can do a lot for other people and go without personal comfort, and you've got lots of energy. Maybe when you're older, you've got less physical energy, but maybe you're smarter, so you can help people in different ways. It changes, doesn't it? As you gain more experience, maybe you can help people more effectively because you know what you have to do and you don't make so many mistakes or take so many wrong turns. So I'd say, generally speaking, just do it. Help people in whatever way you can. And the aim in Buddhism is always to help relieve suffering, but people have many kinds of suffering. It can be on the level of material things, someone who needs food or medicine or accommodation or something. Sometimes it's more verbal, it's practicing giving words of support, listening to someone, giving words of kindness to someone. Sometimes it's on the mental level, you're helping someone to meditate or giving them some insight into how to train this or deal with this human mind which brings us so much stress. You're sharing your experience of meditation with someone. That could be compassion. But setting boundaries is partly determined by the results. So you do it and then you see the results and you have to accept sometimes it works, sometimes it works well, sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes it's hopeless, sometimes it's counterproductive and that was completely the wrong thing to do. Okay, you have to accept sometimes you learn lessons the hard way. But if you're learning, then hopefully you don't keep repeating the same mistakes, and then you learn, what are my limits in terms of physical energy, intelligence, skills? What are the limits of the situation, the person, where they are, what's happening? There's so many areas that you're learning, and you may have to change as time goes on. Things don't stay still, don't they? So maybe you're helping somebody today, but maybe tomorrow you can't help them anymore. The situation has changed. Say you're helping someone who's sick. Maybe today they're very ill in a hospital and you can go and talk to them or you can meditate with them, but then tomorrow they're unconscious. So what you can do may be very limited. You just leave it to the doctors. Life is very uncertain. So as long as we are learning from our experience, then we got the opportunity to adjust and adapt. And you're right, sometimes we have to accept we've got limits, there's not much I can do. We have to practice what we call upekkha, equanimity. Sometimes there's more we can do, and sometimes we're lazy or apathetic, so sometimes we have to kind of kick ourselves up the backside and say, do more. Depends on the situation.
Saralungpu. Next question. Venerable Ajahn, may I ask what practical steps could be taken to reflect on one's moral conduct, described as sila nusati in the texts? Thank you.
Well, cause and effect. If you're not living in a moral way, you say and do things that hurt and harm others, that's going to have a result on you. You won't feel very happy or peaceful. It's not going to have good results on your relations with those people, and maybe you physically or verbally hurt them. So look at cause and effect all the time is one important thing. But then also the heart of sila, say when we practice as a meditation, sila nusati is hiriyottappa, sense of shame and a shying away of doing evil, wrong, bad things, hurtful things, harmful things. Because we're hurting ourselves, we're hurting others. When you are developing sila, you're reflecting on this, the results of actions, and you shy away from doing things that harm people or yourself. Because who wants to be harmed? Who wants those results? So you have to try to establish mindfulness and reflect on things. And you learn sometimes from past mistakes. Sometimes you learn from the feeling that comes up in a situation. Hiriyottappa is often an emotional thing that you feel uncomfortable doing something or saying something, and that's the clue that maybe you're not being very moral or you're hurting yourself, hurting others at that moment. associating with wise people who keep sila helps. That's why people come to monasteries where the standard of sila tends to be quite good, high. Because out in the world often it's very mixed, isn't it? Often people don't have much sila, or only a little bit of sila, or only occasionally have sila. You come into a monastery, maybe something you would dare to do at home, or wouldn't feel much problem with doing at home, in a monastery it would feel out of place. You wouldn't feel comfortable saying those words, doing that thing. So you don't in a monastery, because you're close to sangha or fellow practitioners. So coming to monasteries and retreat centers, those places often helps us to get a more refined sense of hiri-ottappa, and you can notice that, and then you keep reflecting on that. Even when you go home, say, and you're meditating, you reflect on these qualities of hiri-ottappa. They're called the guardians of the world. They're like your own inner guardian angel, stops you doing or saying things that will cause you suffering later on. So it's that voice that, don't do it, don't say it, be careful. It's a warning sometimes. And the important thing is to heighten that, or make it very clear to your mind, so that even when you're on your own, because you can't always be with other practitioners, when you're on your own, you still have it. Ajahn Chah used to say often, he used to say, sila, you practice it so that you're the same whether you're on your own or you're with other people. Something is evil whether you're alone or with other people. So if you do it, even on your own and no one sees it, it's still evil. So don't, get to the point where you're not going to do things that hurt yourself or others, even when you're on your own and no one else knows about it. And the same for doing good. Don't just do good because other people are around to see it and witness it and praise you and say you're doing a good job. Do it when you're on your own. Be diligent. Do good in all situations, be in front of other people or behind other people. Just keep doing good. So good and evil are things you have to learn how to practice to the point where it's just normal for you. We were talking earlier about the mind changing from unenlightened mind to enlightened mind, noble one. The noble ones, their sila is standard for them. It's constant. The noble ones don't sneak around and say, well, I'll keep the precepts in front of everyone, but when no one's here, I'm going to do all these unwholesome things. That's not how a noble one's mind works. It's just constant. 5 precepts, 8 precepts, they're just keeping them. Doesn't matter who's around. And because they also know that, even if you're on your own, the devas are still watching. And your hiri-ottappa is like the deva in your mind, but it's also the real devas are watching as well. And maybe they're not so impressed if you start doing unwholesome things on your own. The devas see and they kind of, who's this guy? Maybe they stop helping you, or they make life difficult for you because they're not impressed with your lack of sila. So don't forget that. There's the devas around, and then there's your own internal deva, your hiri-ottappa.
Sadhu Lumpur. Another question. Dear Ajahn, a friend requested me to pray for her because she is going through a troubling time now. The trouble is caused by her own action in doing business not honestly. As a Buddhist, how should I answer and pray for her so she can go through it?
Well, one thing you can do is meditate and send your thoughts of loving kindness to the person. If you meet them, give them words of support, advise them to keep the precepts, be patient with their situation and not to go the way of that's corrupt or illegal things or doing things that are dishonest. Just give them good advice, maybe get them to meet with people who can give them good advice as well. So you just give support in whatever way you can that's wholesome and going to encourage them to do the right thing rather than the wrong thing. So it just depends how close you are to the person, how much you can help them. It's good to get them to do wholesome things so they get those inputs in their life, then they may feel uncomfortable doing dishonest things and stop.
Sadhu. Another question. Dear Ajahn, would you recommend a particular Buddhist calendar I can refer to on Uposatha days? I have come across different calendars with different dates.
Yeah, the main difference tends to be between Mahayana calendar or Chinese Buddhist calendar and Theravada calendar. The Theravada calendars from Thailand, Burma, Sri Lanka tend to be similar or consistent. So if you want one with the Theravada Buddhist holy days, new moon days, full moon days and so on, then the Forest Sangha calendar on their website, the Forest Sangha calendar is one, but there's many around that you can get. So just Google it. But I'm Theravada Buddhist monk, so I tend to use the Theravadan calendar. If you use the Chinese or the Mahayana calendar, well, the days change. You can use them as well. In the end, a calendar is simply a convention, a way to help you remember the new moon, full moon, and sort of keep in touch with the passage of time. You can use a Mahayana calendar as well, if you want. The important thing is to keep practicing. You may have the best, most accurate calendar in the world, but if you never meditate, you never keep the precepts, you never offer any dana, then what's the point anyway?
Sadhu. Another question. Dear Ajahn, recently I realized that I have made a poor decision due to my attachments. I also realized I have so many attachments created through the 5 aggregates. I realized I have been blinded by the attachments without being aware as well. It could be a habitual way of me mentally processing. How can I see my attachments before they lead me astray?
Practice mindfulness and reflect back on your own 5 khandhas every day. What are you thinking? What views do you hold to? How mindful are you? And you'll see, sometimes we are more mindful. We catch our thoughts and attachments coming up and our reactions to things, our desires. And sometimes we're not mindful and we get into trouble. And you'll notice when you're not mindful and you start thinking in a more unwholesome, unskillful way, then there's trouble, there's suffering. So keep practicing, develop a strong, regular meditation practice. Develop a strong, consistent practice of the 5 precepts, because even if you do have attachments and some internal suffering, if you keep and follow the 5 precepts, they stop that suffering getting too extreme. They stop your attachments causing you too much trouble. They remain internal as just mental states rather than coming out in your behavior. So I would establish your practice with the precepts, regular mindfulness meditation practice, and listening to the Dhamma. Because when you listen to the Dhamma, it straightens your views, and that may take time. So most people I know, they say, well, you begin practicing Buddhism, the first year or 2, you're just learning a few basic things. But over time, maybe many years, you start to get it and you realize, oh, this is very helpful for me. Some people are slower than others. One lady said, oh, when I was young, my mum took me to the temple and I heard these talks. She even heard talks from me 40 years ago. But I didn't get it and I didn't pay much attention and it didn't mean much to me. So, I kind of didn't take much interest in it. But I kept going and my mum kept bringing the monks and bringing me to the monks and bringing the monks to me. And now she's 70, it's like, oh yeah, this has really helped me. Now I understand it. So better late than never.
Sadhu. Next question. Dear Ajahn, I'm curious. Mara is often depicted as a malevolent deity who tempts people away from the path to liberation. However, I've heard that Mara resides in heaven. May I ask, why is that so? Thank you.
Because Mara has a lot of barami and a lot of merit, but still has wrong view. So Mara, the deity Mara, is personified and talked about in the suttas and commentaries, is a deity with a lot of merit. Sila, Samadhi, Panya even, but the Panya is a bit more limited because they don't yet see the value of practicing for Nibbana, so they're always trying to stop the Buddha or Arahants attaining Nibbana, because that kind of proves Mara wrong. Because Mara is like Lord of the heaven realm, got all this power over the sensual realm, what we call Gamaloka, the sensual realm. So it's like, the head of the gang, CEO of the company, billionaire, richest man of the world kind of thing, for comparison. And of course, they don't want anyone to be happier or better or outside of their control. Part of their happiness is controlling everything and everybody within the sensual realm, not letting them escape the sensual realm, not attaining deep states of samadhi, not practicing insight to develop a pure mind free from greed, anger and delusion. Most of the time, Mara doesn't need to do very much to stop people, because people just love to attach to the world anyway, and they get confused and suffer all the time without Mara having to lift a finger. That's something people often forget. They think, oh, Mara's on my case, giving me a hard time. Well, Mara doesn't need to do that. You give yourself a hard time. But occasionally, a practitioner is well developed, and Mara has an investment in not letting them see the Dhamma or realize the Dhamma, becoming an Arya Pugala. So Mara may devise some kind of trick or delusion, something to hold them back. So the obvious one is something that will bring up their lust or their anger or their wrong views. So Mara performs that role. But Mara has many great qualities. To get to that position of being Mara, they'll develop many good things as well. Venerable Maha Moggallana, who you probably are aware is one of the Buddha's right-hand monks, foremost in the practice of samadhi, foremost in the practice of psychic ability, and one of the monks the Buddha relied on to help teach and spread the word of Buddhism. He said in a previous life he'd been Mara. So if you see the big picture, even an Arahant can formally have been Mara. That's something to think about. So Mara has some good qualities there as well. It's just they have wrong view, because they are invested in seeing sensual happiness, attachment to the world and the world of the senses as the highest, the best. So they're not turned to practicing for Nibbana. But because the mind that is liberated from the sensual world through insight, the mind of an Arya Pugala, or particularly the mind of an Arahant, is so pure, it's like they have something better than Mara, something that Mara doesn't have. And because Mara still has attachment, you might say greed of a subtle nature, they don't like that. So Mara doesn't want people to attain Nibbana, because it's like, out of my grip. I'm kind of describing it here in kind of storybook terms, but it's like that. So Mara has some good qualities and skills and knowledge and samadhi and all kinds of things as well, but they're not enlightened, and they still got a way to go on their practice.
Sarunumpu. So, a couple of more questions. Dear Ajahn, how should we understand sanya in meditation?
Sanya is one of the khandhas, often translated as perception, or you might say how you remember things, how you interpret things through memory, because we don't always remember accurately, and you can direct memory, you can train it, you can use it, but often it uses us, sometimes it tricks us, or it's like a mirage, the Buddha said. You remember something that's you thought was true, but it's not. it's tricky dealing with sanya, but you can also use it as a tool. So part of our practice of meditation is to train sanya. So like we say, a super sanya, the perception of the unattractive. You focus your mind remembering the unattractive qualities of the human body or a certain object. Or marana sanya, the perception of death. We were talking about that earlier. It's a perception you can bring up and train your mind to really become very aware that we will die one day and that everything is impermanent, everyone we know will die and we'll separate from them through death. So these perceptions, and as many others, you can develop and use as meditations, as reflections that help you to both calm the mind and develop some understanding and insight. But of course, perception, sanya, is impermanent, unsatisfactory, not self in its nature, not to be clung to as self. That's part of the problem. We remember things and we cling to our memory. So one of the biggest sufferings of humans is when they get old and they start losing their memory. It's annoying, it's frustrating, it's sad. We don't like it, we don't want that, but it happens because memory is impermanent. So keep bringing that reflection up to help you deal with that truth. So there's plenty to study with this word sanya, perception. I'm just giving you a simple explanation. There's more you can read about if you want.
Sadhu Luang Por. Sorry, that was the last question so far. Are there any other questions?
Well, maybe enough for tonight. We've talked for quite a long time. But nice talking to you, and I wish you well with your practice. And as far as I know, we'll be back next week with another Zoom session.